Steamboat coming, steamboat coming, steamboat coming, black smoke fills the sky. Doors swing open, the work's coming running, steamboat coming to town. Boys come whooping and the dogs come a-barking, steamboat coming to town. Horses and carts rumble over cobblestone, steamboat coming to town. Lazy loafer, hurry, run along, steamboat coming to town. She's long and slim, sleek and pretty, sailing down the river just like a cloud. Fire in a smokestack lights up the sky, she's so loud all the babies cry. Steamboat coming, steamboat coming, steamboat coming, black smoke fills the sky. That is a song that I will never get tired of. My name is Captain Henry Detweiller, and I was a steamboat captain here on the Illinois, the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Ozark, the Arkansas, the Tennessee, Kentucky, and Ohio rivers for more than 30 years. But of course, my life did not begin at the helm of a steamboat. My life did not even begin in this fine nation. I was born in the Alsace-Lorraine region of France. Maybe you know. Sometimes this region was controlled by France and sometimes by Germany. With wars going back and forth, my father, who owned two rather large plantations, wisely had friends in both courts. So no matter who was in power, we had kings and princesses dine at our table. But then that short man with his hand in his shirt, maybe you heard of him, Napoleon Bonaparte, waged war across Europe. And in the revolution, my father died destitute, lost everything. With his wife, my mother, 3 children yet at home, and she had no way to take care of us. But my oldest brother, who had already immigrated to the New World, heard about the demise of our dearly departed father, and he not only sent his condolences, he sent a check to pay for our passage. We sailed from Bremerhaven, the port of Bremen, across the North Sea and across the Atlantic, 68 days. I think that'd be a long journey. You'd be right. But it took another 48 days to get from New York to Peoria. We boarded a steamboat that took us up the Hudson River to the Erie Canal. We boarded a canal boat that went through the Erie Canal to Lake Erie, where we boarded another steamboat that took us from Buffalo, New York, over to Cleveland, where we boarded yet another canal boat that took us up the Cuyahoga, through a series of locks and canals, down the Scioto River to the Ohio River, where we boarded yet another steamboat that took us down the Ohio, up the Mississippi, up the Illinois. How many of you could imagine making that journey? In 1832, this was still the Wild West. Why, Black Hawk's War had just been fought the year before, and Indians still paddled their canoes down the wild streams. The old French forts of Kaskaskia and Fort Chartres and Fort Massac still stood guarding the river's banks. It was wilder than any boy growing up in France could ever imagine. When I arrived in Peoria, my first job, washing dishes in my brother's saloon on Water Street. But that's where I met the steamboat captains. That's where I heard their tales, tall and true. That's where my dream was born. I want to be a riverboat man. I want to be a hammer-down riverboat man. Hammer-down riverboat man. I'll be a lightning buck pilot, a captain too. On my own boat, it's the least that I can do. She'll be perfect too. A riverboat pilot's a riverboat queen. Stand at the big wheel, I'll make that river sing. Mark Twain, half Twain, quarter less 3. Put the boat in the river, gonna rip out a tree. No boat on the river can keep up with me. No siree. I want to be a hammer-down. I want to be a hammer-down riverboat man. I begged the captains to take me on board, and they said no. They said my brother had warned them. If they hired me away from his tavern, he'd stop serving them. We know where their loyalty lay. So I stowed away on board a boat bound for St. Louis. I have to admit, I was more than a little scared when the captain caught me. You know what they do to a stowaway? Maybe they're just teasing a young boy, but they always told me if they caught me as a stowaway, they'd tie me to the paddle wheel and make me go around a few times. So I was more than a little scared. When the captain grabbed me by the ear, dragged me from my hiding spot, kicked me back to the floor, and then he recognized me. Lucky for me, this captain was a frequent customer in my brother's saloon. So instead of tying me to the paddle wheel, he put me to work. Swabbing decks and serving passengers. Can I get you something else to drink, ma'am? Washing dishes, I was good at that. I earned my keep from Peoria to St. Louis and back again. I'll never forget the first time I went to St. Louis, 100 steamboats. Could you imagine? 100 steamboats stacked, some places 2 and 3 thick. Another time, years later, when I was driving my own boat, as I was coming into the wharf at Laclede's Landing there in St. Louis, one of the steamboats exploded, casting fire in all directions, and the wind blowing in the wrong direction. Within moments, 100 steamboats burst into flame. The entire wharf was caught in the conflagration. Lucky for me, I was still in the middle of the river, and I backed away to safety. That was years later. That first trip to St. Louis, 7 days there and back, 7 of the most glorious days of my life. But when I got back to Peoria, once more the captain grabbed me by the ear, dragged me, kicked me to the floor through the door of my brother's saloon. My brother, he was so mad at me. He thought I drowned. He was so mad, he fired me. So I got a job at the Block and Cool department store selling ladies' shoes. Ma'am, would you like to try that with a little more heel in it? But I had enough of little ladies' dainty feet when I found a steamboat captain who would hire me as a cub pilot. Now, as a cub pilot, it was my job to memorize the river. Could you imagine? Memorize 265 miles of the Illinois, every bend and every curve, and then memorize 2,000 miles of the Mississippi, every willow post, every sandbar. And of course, once you memorize the whole river, it's all for naught, because the river changes every day. But you learn to read the river the way some folks read books. And those old cliches are often true, you know. Still waters do run deep. Where there's a riffle, it's a warning that there's a Sawyer. How many of you ever heard of Tom Sawyer? Now, on land, a Sawyer is a man who saws logs. But in the parlance of a riverboat captain, a Sawyer is a log, a root ball, that looks like a saw. And if you run over it, it rips a hole in your hull and will sink you. So when Mark Twain names his main character Tom Sawyer, what he's really saying, you better watch that boy. He'll sink you if you're not careful. I remember one time I was coming through Peoria, heading north towards Peru, delivering the mail, driving a small boat called the Frontier. I had to hammer down, full steam ahead, as I was coming into the Narrows. A much bigger boat, the Panama, was coming downstream. Now, the downbound traffic always has right of way. I tried to steer clear, but it was too late. She rams me. We start taking on water. Hundreds of passengers could lose their lives. I didn't know what to do. I steered it towards the shore. I stuck it in the mud. All the passengers escaped unscathed, and most of the cargo was salvaged before the boat caught fire and burned to the waterline. For all I know, the hull of that steamboat is still there, and my career as a steamboat captain was over before it even began. And I went back to the Block and Cool selling ladies' shoes. But I'd had enough of little ladies' dainty, dirty feet. When spring came, the captain not only salvaged a cast iron pot-belly engine, he salvaged the cub pilot. He said he liked the way I kept my cool in a crisis, and he hired me as a fully licensed pilot. In 1842, I could earn $250 a month. That's more than the preacher made all year. And finally, my mama was proud of me. And because I lived on board the boat with free room and board, I saved every penny. And before long, I bought my own boat. I named her the St. Paul because I drove her from St. Paul, Minneapolis to New Orleans and back again. It was about that time that I met this tall, lanky lawyer riding the 7th Circuit. Maybe you heard of him. Abraham Lincoln was one of my best friends and a frequent passenger on my riverboat. Well, I remember one time I was coming north from St. Louis and I had some passengers who wanted to disembark in Pekin. So I stick the boat in the mud, I swing the stage to the shore, and just as the passengers were getting off, I heard that Abraham Lincoln was about to give a speech in the Tazewell County courtyard. So I got everybody off my boat now to go hear this great man's oration. I found out later he told me that he was warming up for one of the last of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. He was on his way to Peoria to catch a train out to Galesburg. I insisted that he ride on my steamboat. And I took Abraham Lincoln to Peoria the last time he visited this fair city.